I never thought I'd be the guy someone asked to teach them how to kiss. Like, I've kissed a few people in my life, sure, but I'm not exactly some expert or anything. So when Jamie cornered me after class that Friday and, no joke, straight up asked if I could teach him how to kiss, I was caught so off guard I almost laughed. Instead, I just blinked and said, "Wait, seriously?" And he looked so nervous, flushed cheeks fiddling with his backpack strap, that I figured maybe he was serious. Which he was. This whole thing started a few weeks earlier when Jamie transferred into my college apartment complex. I live in this ridiculously quirky little building downtown, kind of artsy, slightly rundown, but with a vibe that makes you feel like you're part of some low-budget indie movie. Jamie moved in next door and, honestly, I thought he looked like he just walked out of a vintage fashion shoot. Curly dark hair, these intense green eyes, and a smile that was somehow shy and confident at the same time. He seemed a bit out of place, but in a cool way, like he was quietly trying to find his groove. We bumped into each other a few times in the hallway or by the mailbox, but the real icebreaker was when I caught him struggling with the jar lid in the communal kitchen. I'm not saying I'm the strongest guy around, but I can open a stubborn jar better than most. So I stepped in, popped the lid off, and handed it back with a grin. That little moment was the start of our weirdly easy friendship. Jamie's kind of the opposite of me. He's this theater major with a voice that carries even when he's whispering, and he talks with his hands like he's directing an invisible play. I'm more of a laid-back graphic design student who's happiest with headphones in and sketchpad out. But somehow, we clicked. We started hanging out after classes, grabbing coffee, watching movies in my apartment. Nothing major, just two guys figuring stuff out. But then came that Friday after class when he asked me to teach him how to kiss. I swear, I felt my brain short-circuit. Because it wasn't like Jamie was some clueless freshman. He was sharp and charming and had this effortless way of making people like him. And here he was, totally vulnerable, asking me for help with something so intimate. He said, "Look, I've never really done it before, like kissing, and I don't want to mess it up when it actually matters, you know? So maybe you could show me, or at least talk me through it." I'm sitting there trying to process all this, and honestly, I'm thinking, why me? Why not just watch a YouTube tutorial or something? But the way he looked at me, like he was trusting me, something just clicked. Maybe it was the late afternoon light filtering through the apartment windows, or the quiet buzz of the city outside, but I nodded. Okay, yeah, I guess we can figure it out together. That's how it started. And honestly, I had no clue where this was going to lead. But for the first time in a while, I felt something shift. A mix of nervous excitement and that weird hope you get when you think maybe this could be more than just a lesson in kissing. So we agreed to meet up that evening at my place. I wasn't exactly sure what I was expecting. Like, was this going to turn into some awkward coaching session or a bunch of weird silences and nervous smiles? I figured we'd start out talking it through, maybe laugh about the whole thing, and then call it a night. But Jamie showed up a little after 7, carrying a bag of snacks and looking like he'd rehearsed what to say about 10 times in his head. "Hey," he said, dropping the snacks on my kitchen counter. "Thanks for doing this. I mean, not a ton of people I know would even want to get involved with. Well, this kind of thing." I gave him a shrug. It's not exactly the weirdest request I've gotten. Which, honestly, was true. College life is full of all kinds of awkward moments, but I was glad he felt comfortable enough to ask me. We settled into the living room, me on the couch, him on the floor with his back against it, munching on chips like he was trying to act casual, but definitely wasn't. I could tell he was working himself up. "So, what do you want to know first?" I asked, trying to keep things light. "The technical stuff? Like, how to even start? Or the whole vibe and energy part?" Jamie looked up, chewing thoughtfully. "I guess everything. But mostly, I don't want to be that guy who just goes in all awkward and messes up the moment. I want it to feel right. You know, genuine." I nodded, feeling a little warm at that. That makes sense. Honestly, the best kisses are the ones where you're paying attention, not just to what you're doing, but to the other person. Like, if they lean in, you lean in. If they pull back, you pull back. It's kind of like a dance. He smiled, and I swear it was the first time I saw a crack in that nervous armor. "A dance, huh? I like that." I'm not great at dancing, but maybe kissing will be easier. We laughed, and that broke the tension enough that I felt comfortable getting a bit more detailed. Okay, so first things first, breath. Bad breath is a deal breaker, so maybe don't eat garlic before the big moment. Jamie's eyes widened. Noted. No garlic. Then, when you lean in, start slow. Don't rush. Maybe just a light touch of lips at first. No need to go full-on movie kiss from the start. He looked down, fiddling with the hem of his sleeve. Yeah, I've always thought about that part, the first kiss. It feels like such a big deal. It is, I said quietly. But it's also just a moment. One out of many, hopefully. I wasn't sure why I said that. Maybe because I wanted it to be more than just a lesson for him. There was a brief silence, and then Jamie looked up at me with those green eyes that seemed to glow in the dim light of my apartment. Can I ask you something a little personal? Shoot, I said, leaning back. He swallowed. Have you ever taught someone how to kiss before? I paused, trying not to sound too casual when the truth was kind of the opposite. No, not really. I mean, I've kissed people, but I don't think I've ever been the teacher in that situation. Jamie gave a small laugh, so we're both kind of figuring this out then. Yeah, looks like it. The next thing I knew, he was standing up and pacing a little, like he was trying to organize his thoughts. Okay, so hypothetically, if you were the one getting taught, how would you want it to go? I thought about that. Honestly, I'd want someone who's patient, someone who doesn't make me feel stupid for being nervous. And maybe someone who's honest about what feels good or what doesn't. Jamie nodded slowly, looking almost relieved. That sounds fair. I hate feeling like I'm messing things up. You won't, I promised. Not with me around. The conversation took a turn when Jamie got quiet and then asked, would it help if we practiced with, kisses on the hand first? Just to get comfortable? At first, I blinked. Kisses on the hand? Like a gentleman? He shrugged, cheeks reddening. I don't know. Seems less intense than a full lip thing. Maybe it's a way to start. I smiled, genuinely amused. You're ridiculous, you know that? He grinned back, the nerves fading a bit. Yeah, well, ridiculous sometimes works. We moved to the couch, and Jamie held out his hand like he was about to ask permission, which was honestly kind of adorable. I leaned in and kissed the back of his hand softly, exaggerating the motion like a corny movie scene. When I pulled back, he was smiling wide, eyes shining. See how easy that was? I teased. He laughed, but then got serious again. Thanks, man, for doing this, for not making it weird. I shrugged, honestly feeling like I was the lucky one here. No problem. Sometimes the best lessons come from the unexpected. Later that night, after a couple more rounds of hand kisses and talking about everything from first date jitters to how to tell if someone's into you, I realized something. This wasn't just about teaching Jamie how to kiss. It was about being there for someone who trusted me to help with something vulnerable. And maybe, just maybe, it was the start of something neither of us saw coming. I had no clue how this was going to end, but I knew one thing for sure. I was already looking forward to the next lesson. That night, after Jamie left, I kept replaying the evening in my head. It was weird how easy it felt to be around him, like the usual walls I put up just kind of melted without me trying. I wasn't usually this open with people. Hell, I'm the guy who keeps his emotions on a tight leash, but something about Jamie made it simple to let my guard down. I found myself texting him a little later, just to say thanks again and maybe check in that he got home okay. He replied almost immediately, with a simple, yeah, made it safe. And honestly, that was fun. Looking forward to the next lesson. Next lesson? My phone buzzed again, and I had to laugh. This was turning into something way more than I expected. A few days later, we met up again, this time at the small park near my building. It was one of those rare spring evenings where the air is just warm enough, and the sun is dipping low, casting everything in this orange glow that makes the world seem softer. Jamie showed up with that same nervous energy, but this time I noticed he had a little more confidence in his step. We found a bench under a large oak tree, and I pulled out my phone to put on some music, just something mellow to fill the quiet gaps. Jamie settled in beside me, and for a moment we just sat there, watching people jog by or walk their dogs. So I said, "Are we just gonna keep practicing kisses on hands, or should we move up to something more?" I trailed off, not wanting to be too forward. Jamie smiled, biting his lip just a little. I was thinking about that, like maybe a kiss on the cheek? Or, the corner of the lips? Just to see how it feels. That sounded reasonable enough, so I nodded. Okay, we can try that. He shifted closer, and I could feel the heat from his body. We'd been sitting next to each other for a while now, but this felt different, more charged. Jamie turned his head slightly toward me, and I leaned in, planting a gentle kiss on his cheek. He closed his eyes briefly, and when he pulled back, he grinned like he'd just won something. "Your turn," he said, reaching for my hand. I laughed but held out my cheek anyway. He kissed me softly, just a touch, but it sent this strange flutter through my chest. It wasn't just the kiss itself. It was the way he looked at me afterward, like he was surprised by how good it felt. We spent the next hour trying out little kisses, on hands, cheeks, corners of mouths, each one more natural than the last. Jamie's nervousness was fading, replaced by this quiet confidence that made me want to lean closer more often than I should have. At one point, he looked at me and said, "This isn't as scary as I thought it would be." I smiled back. "Told you. It's all about feeling it out." Then he took a breath, and suddenly the mood shifted. "Can I ask you something else?" "Anything. What do you think about, when does a kiss become more than just practice? When does it mean something?" I blinked. That question wasn't something I was totally ready for, but I appreciated how honest he was being. I think it's when it's not just about the kiss itself, but about who you're sharing it with. It's less about technique and more about connection. When you want to be close because you actually care, not just because you're nervous or curious. Jamie nodded slowly, chewing his bottom lip. "Yeah, that makes sense." There was a long pause, and I could feel the energy between us thickening, like the air before a thunderstorm. I was staring at his face, noticing the way his eyes caught the fading light, how his lips parted just slightly, and I realized I wanted to kiss him. Not as part of some lesson, but because I actually wanted to. Before I could overthink it, Jamie shifted just a little closer, and I felt his breath hitch. "So," he whispered, "how do I know when I'm ready for the real thing?" I swallowed hard, heart pounding out of my chest. "Maybe when you stop thinking about being ready and just do it." It was one of those moments where time slows down and suddenly everything feels electric. Our faces were inches apart, and I could smell the faint scent of his cologne mixed with the spring air. Then, gently, Jamie closed the distance, pressing his lips to mine. It was soft at first, almost tentative, like both of us were testing the waters. But then I felt him relax. And I did too. The kiss deepened just a little, fingers brushing against my arm, and everything that had felt awkward or uncertain just melted away. When we finally pulled back, breathless and smiling, Jamie looked at me with those earnest green eyes and said, "Okay, that was definitely worth the lessons." I laughed, feeling like I was floating. "Yeah, I'd say so." We stayed on that bench a little longer, just holding hands and watching the sun dip below the horizon, but I knew this was the start of something new, something real. Teaching Jamie how to kiss was supposed to be a simple favor, but it turned out to be the best kind of surprise. And, honestly, I can't wait to see where this goes next. After that night in the park, things between Jamie and me started to shift in ways I hadn't expected. It wasn't like we suddenly declared ourselves a couple or anything dramatic like that, but there was this quiet undercurrent, like a secret we both knew but hadn't put into words yet. The kind of thing that made every glance linger a little longer, every touch feel electric. The next week, we kept hanging out more, but it was different now. There was a softness to the way we talked, a kind of ease that felt like we were discovering some unspoken rhythm. We'd meet up in the evenings, sometimes at my place, sometimes just wandering around the neighborhood. Jamie's nervous energy was still there now and then, but it was less about fear and more about excitement. like he was stepping into something new and thrilling. One night, we ended up at this tiny little coffee shop that stayed open late. I think I picked it because it was quiet and low-key, perfect for just talking. We sat in a corner booth, sipping on lattes and sharing stories about awkward first crushes and embarrassing moments from high school. You know, Jamie said, stirring his drink thoughtfully, I never imagined that asking someone to teach me how to kiss would turn into this. Feels kinda surreal. I laughed, the warmth of the place and his smile making me forget how shy I usually was around new people. Yeah, who knew a kiss lesson could be the beginning of an actual, whatever this is? He grinned, eyes sparkling. I like whatever this is. It's nice not having to label everything right away. I nodded. Me too. At some point during the night, the conversation faded, and we just watched the rain start to fall outside the window. Soft, steady drops making little circles in the puddles on the pavement. Jamie reached across the table and took my hand in his. It was a simple gesture, but it sent this jolt of electricity straight to my chest. I'm glad I asked you to teach me, he whispered, thumb brushing over my knuckles. I squeezed his hand gently. Me too. We stayed like that for a while, just holding hands and listening to the rain. I wanted to say something about how much he meant to me, but words felt too big, too sudden, so I just kept quiet and let the moment speak for itself. Over the next few days, I caught myself thinking about Jamie more than usual. I'd be sitting in class or walking to the store, and suddenly a memory of his smile or the way he tucked his hair behind his ear would pop into my head. It was distracting, but in a good way, like my brain was rewiring itself to notice the little things that mattered. One afternoon, Jamie invited me over to his place for a movie night. His apartment was a few blocks away, a cozy little space filled with books, theater posters, and string lights that gave off this warm, inviting glow. He made popcorn, a bit too much butter, but I didn't say anything because it was kind of perfect. We curled up on his couch, and halfway through the movie, Jamie shifted closer, resting his head on my shoulder. My heart was pounding, but I stayed still, letting myself enjoy the closeness. It felt natural, like we'd been doing this forever. At one point, he looked up at me and smiled, eyes bright. So what's next on the curriculum, Professor? I laughed, nudging him playfully. I think you're ready to graduate from hand kisses. He grinned, nudging back. Good. I was starting to think you were going to make me practice on my elbow or something. We ended up kissing that night, a little more confident and sure than before. It wasn't perfect. There were moments where we pulled back, laughed, adjusted, but it was ours, and that made all the difference. But as much as things felt right, part of me couldn't ignore the little worries creeping in. What if this was just a fun phase? What if Jamie was still figuring things out, and I was just a step along the way? I didn't want to scare him off by being too serious, but I also didn't want to lose what we had. One evening, a week or so later, we were sitting on the fire escape outside my apartment, the city lights twinkling around us. Jamie was quiet for a while, and then he looked at me with that vulnerable expression that made my heart ache. Can I ask you something? He said softly. Always. Are you looking for something serious? Because I feel like I might be, and I don't want to mess this up. I took a deep breath, glad he brought it up. Honestly? Yeah. I want to see where this goes. I'm not into just casual things right now. I want something real with you. He smiled, relief washing over his face. Me too. We sat there for a moment, just holding hands and watching the world move around us. It felt like the start of something important, something worth taking a chance on. Teaching Jamie how to kiss had turned into so much more than I ever imagined. It was about trust, connection, and the messy, beautiful way two people can find each other when they least expect it. And as I looked into his eyes, I knew I was exactly where I was supposed to be. After that conversation on the fire escape, everything felt like it had shifted into a new gear. Not in a flashy or over-the-top way, but in those small, quiet moments that make you realize something's different. We were more than just friends awkwardly navigating this kissing thing. We were trying to figure out what being with each other really meant. A couple of days later, Jamie and I found ourselves at a little bookstore cafe tucked away from the main street. I had suggested it because I knew Jamie loved the smell of old books and the cozy, slightly dusty vibe of places like that. We grabbed 2 coffees and found a spot by the window. the gray afternoon light making everything feel calm and kind of perfect. Jamie pulled out a dog-eared copy of some play he'd been assigned to read for class, but he kept glancing over at me like he wanted to say something. Finally, he set the book down and looked up, eyes a little serious. "So, I've been thinking about how fast things have moved," he said, twisting his cup between his hands. "And I guess I'm just wondering if you're okay with that? I mean, I don't want to rush you or anything." I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through me. Honestly, I'm way more surprised at how natural all this feels. I didn't expect to be moving this fast either, but with you, it just makes sense. He exhaled, relieved. Same here. I just didn't want to mess it up. "You couldn't mess this up if you tried," I teased, nudging his shoulder. Jamie laughed, and that easy sound melted some of the tension in the air. We fell into one of those comfortable silences where words aren't necessary. Just two people content to be near each other. The next week, we started doing more normal couple stuff, if you want to call it that. We cooked dinner together in my tiny kitchen, tripping over each other and laughing as we tried not to burn the pasta. We binge-watched a ridiculous TV series that neither of us really liked, but enjoyed trash-talking. We even went to a local art show, wandering through crowded rooms and quietly sharing our favorite pieces. One night, after a particularly fun evening of cooking and bad jokes, I walked Jamie back to his place. The streetlights glowed softly, casting pools of yellow light on the wet pavement from a light drizzle earlier. We paused outside his door, the kind of quiet moment that makes your heart race and your stomach flip. Jamie looked up at me, eyes bright and hopeful. "Can I kiss you goodnight?" I didn't hesitate. "Always." Our lips met, soft and familiar now, but still full of that spark that had drawn me to him in the first place. When we pulled apart, he smiled shyly, resting his forehead against mine. "I'm lucky, you know," he murmured. "Yeah," I said, "me too." That night, as I walked back to my apartment, I felt this strange mixture of excitement and calm I hadn't felt in a long time. It was like every piece of the puzzle was starting to fit together, and the picture looked better than I'd ever imagined. A few days later, Jamie invited me over again. This time, he was nervous in a different way, like he had something important to say but wasn't sure how to start. We sat on his couch, the soft hum of a vinyl record playing in the background. So, he began, fiddling with the hem of his shirt. "I've been thinking about us. About how this started, me asking you for kissing lessons, and how it's turned into something more." I nodded, encouraging him to keep going. "I guess what I'm trying to say is, I really like you, more than just a friend, more than a crush, and I want to know if you feel the same." I reached out, taking his hand in mine. "I do. I like you a lot, Jamie." His face lit up, and he squeezed my hand tight. "Good, because I've been scared to say it out loud, but I've been feeling this way for a while." We leaned in, kissing again, but this time it felt different, not just practice or discovery, but a promise, a beginning. From that night on, we didn't just talk about the future, we started imagining it, planning little trips, sharing playlists, and dreaming about what life might look like as more than just two guys figuring out how to kiss. And honestly, I never thought a simple question, "Can you teach me how to kiss?" would lead me here, but I'm so grateful it did. Because sometimes the best things come from the most unexpected places, and sometimes teaching someone how to kiss means learning how to love all over again. After that night when Jamie said those words, the ones that made me realize we were both trying to figure out how to be more than just two guys stumbling through kisses, things started to settle into this strange, beautiful rhythm. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't always easy, but it felt real. A couple weeks later, I found myself sitting in my apartment, scrolling absent-mindedly through a flyer for the upcoming Pride Parade. I'd never been before, and honestly, I was a little nervous about what it would be like. But Jamie, he was all in. He wanted us to go together. And part of me was excited, but another part was worried about how people might look at us, or what my family might think if they ever found out. I texted Jamie, "So, Pride?" His reply was quick. "Definitely. It's our first, right? Let's make it unforgettable." We agreed on a plan to meet early Saturday morning and hit the parade together. When that day came, Jamie showed up wearing this bright, quirky shirt covered in rainbows and little unicorns. I was wearing something simpler, but the smile on his face made me feel like I belonged in a festival, even if I was still figuring out how to be out and proud. The streets were buzzing with energy, people dancing, waving rainbow flags, and just living their truths openly. Jamie grabbed my hand, weaving through the crowd with a grin. "See? Doesn't this feel amazing?" he said, eyes bright. I had to admit, it did. There was something freeing about being surrounded by so many people who didn't just accept who they were, but celebrated it. Jamie leaned in and kissed me briefly, right there on the street, and I felt a surge of warmth and belonging. Later, we found a small food truck selling tacos and sat on the curb, sharing a plate between us. Jamie looked over at me, a little quieter now. "Hey, thank you. For being patient with me, for teaching me, for everything." I shrugged, but my heart was full. "You taught me just as much." He laughed softly, and then, with a sudden playful spark, said, "So, do you think you're ready to teach me the next lesson? Like, how to handle the inevitable awkward first date moment?" I grinned. "Bring it on." That night, as I walked home alone, the city lights reflecting off the wet pavement, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't just teaching Jamie how to kiss anymore. I was learning how to open up, how to trust someone again, how to want something more. Our relationship didn't come with grand declarations or perfect moments. It had stumbles and silences, misunderstandings and laughter. But with every step, with every kiss, clumsy or confident, we built something real. One evening, not long after Pride, Jamie invited me over for dinner. He'd been working on a new monologue for class and wanted to practice it. I watched him perform, his hands moving with passion and his voice steady, and I realized how much I admired him, not just for his charm or his smile, but for his courage to be himself on stage and off it. Afterward, as we sat on his couch, the city skyline twinkling outside the window, Jamie turned to me. "I've been thinking," he said quietly, "about how starting with a simple question, 'Can you teach me how to kiss?' actually changed everything for me. For us." I nodded, feeling the same. Sometimes the smallest moments lead to the biggest changes. He smiled, leaning in to kiss me softly. "Here's to the unexpected." And as I held him close, I knew we were just at the beginning of something worth every nervous step, every awkward lesson, and every stolen kiss. Because in the end, love isn't about knowing all the answers. It's about finding someone willing to learn alongside you. Months had passed since that first awkward question Jamie asked me, "Can you teach me how to kiss?" And somehow, in the process of figuring that out together, we'd built something quietly strong. Not flashy or perfect, but honest and steady. It wasn't always easy. We still had moments where we stumbled over words or didn't know how to say what we felt. But we made space for those moments too. One Saturday afternoon, Jamie and I were sitting on the roof of my building, feet dangling over the edge, watching the city hum below us. The sun was warm but gentle, and a soft breeze carried the mixed scents of coffee shops and blooming flowers up to us. Jamie leaned against my shoulder like it was the most natural thing in the world, and I found myself smiling without even thinking about it. "I'm glad you were the one I asked that question," he said quietly. "You made something that felt scary into something I never want to let go of." I looked down at him, feeling that familiar squeeze in my chest. "I'm glad too. I didn't realize how much I needed someone to teach me how to be open again." He smiled, eyes soft. "Guess we ended up teaching each other." There was a pause, but it wasn't awkward, just comfortable. Two people who had shared uncertainty and laughter and quiet kisses, who'd learned that sometimes the best relationships don't start with fireworks, but with small, brave steps. Jamie turned to me and brushed a stray curl away from his face. "So what's next for us? More lessons? More awkward practices?" I laughed and shook my head. "Maybe just more of this. Being together, figuring it out as we go. No rush, no pressure, just us." He nodded, his hand finding mine, fingers intertwining like they'd always belonged together. "Yeah, I like that." We sat there for a while longer, watching the sun dip low and the city lights start to flicker on. And in that quiet moment, I realized something. Love isn't about knowing every step ahead of time. It's about holding someone's hand through the unknown, trusting that you'll find your way together. Jamie squeezed my hand gently, and I leaned in to kiss him. Soft, sure, and full of everything we'd learned along the way. And just like that, it felt like home.